Every story begins with a spark. A single page, a single voice, a single chapter. Welcome to Chapter 1, where our authors take you on the journey in their own words. Settle in, listen closely. This is where the adventure begins.
Whiskers in the Dark, Book 1, Milk Treading, by Nick Smith. Chapter 1. Where the hell am I? Julius Kyle was cold, even though he was buried beneath 2 shovelfuls of sand in his fur coat. Another frosty morning, Julius half opened an eye to explore the dawn. A trail of ice clung to the railings, warning him to stay in the sand. He hadn't woken up this early since his school days. Years of sloth, lack of discipline, and an air of contempt for the world had got him used to a 10 a.m. wake-up call. Later in the day, around mid-afternoon, if it was warm enough, he would usually take a nap to sleep off his lunch. Today was an exception, a real wake-up call. He had to be at work on time. He'd been summoned. An appointment had been scheduled with the editor, Maurice A. Gray. Tardiness would not do. Maurice had already warned him that he had to shape up and work harder. There were deadlines to meet, celebrities impatient to be interviewed, and readers hungry for daily scoops. The first time Maurice had chastised him, Julius was indignant, affronted, dismissive, but he'd taken the editor's words to heart. It was time for a few resolutions to be made. First resolution? Get to work. Julius got up and dusted himself down. Damp clumps of grit fell down his back. This wasn't right. The smell, the bright light, the way the world around him was moving, but he was standing still. What was I drinking last night? He kicked sand toward the railings, watching it ghost away in the morning breeze. He was standing on a mound of the stuff and starting to feel seasick. His nose was moist with tears and snot. That was supposed to be a sign of ill health, right? A wet nose meant you were coming down with something nasty. He dabbed at his nose, wiping it twice. It had always looked too big for his face, out of proportion, a blot on his copybook features. You look fine, he told himself. Everybody's insecure. It took him a while to get his bearings. Mast, funnel, cabin, bow, squared off stern. He was on a sand barge littered with cat droppings drifting downriver. If he squinted hard enough, he could see the ghettos on the south bank. Now he knew why he felt so cold. I have to get home. Get ready for work. Julius couldn't see a crew member or a captain. Perhaps he'd thrown them all overboard in a drunken rage the night before. Hardly likely, as he had a slight physique with the width of a standard lamp. The only sensation that clung tight to his fuddled brain was a headache that pumped in time to the barge sluice. Julius cocked his ears as he explored the cabin. No pilot, few controls. He was on a barge. The rudder controls looked easy enough to operate. He overrode the autopilot, fumbling in his haste. Once he'd steered the barge toward the right bank, he walked to the stern, leaning on a railing to support himself. It was difficult for him to keep his balance, the river churning beneath him, unsettling the rickety barge. The vessel accelerated, heading for the nearest jetty, water ribboning past the bow, and Julius had no intention of falling overboard. Accelerating? The owners of the barge would not be happy. Not that they'd be able to vent their rage on him if he stayed on the boat, which was on a collision course with a small, moored tanker. I'm going to be late for work. There was no time to get to the rudder controls, so he leapt for the jetty, his tail catching on the railing as he jumped through the air. The barge struck the tanker with a dull thud, sinking with alarming speed. Julius picked himself up, walked away from the mess and headed home, hoping no one saw him. He didn't stop to count his bruises. He was still in a daze from the night before, and he could not afford to lose his job. Visions slipped into his head as he left the riverbank. The night had been wild and long with a modicum of merriment. At the end of the night he tried to sink back to his digs. Around him, the buildings had stretched into lean, bending pillars, making it difficult for him to lean against when he felt woozy. He vaguely remembered a sensation of being lifted, carried. Someone had dropped him. He'd hit his head. He suspected that someone had slung him onto the barge, but he had no idea who'd done it. It didn't take him long to reach his house, where he gave himself a quick wash. His claws scarped on the linoleum as he cleaned his matted hair. Sleep clung to the lids of his moon-crescent eyes. He didn't consider himself a heavy drinker, but when he got going with his workmate, Mick, he would often end up stumbling home. Last night was a speed line blur. He needed some milk. Julius had insisted that his kitchen be fitted with the biggest fridge in the showroom. It took up half the room. Popping open the paw-marked appliance, he scanned the row of milk bottles on the top shelf. A mixture of fresh, dodgy, and extremely gone off. Resolution 2, clear out the fridge tonight. Insistent wind rattled at the back window shutters. Julius's ears twitched and stretched back a little. Someone had been in the spare room again, snooping around. Julius popped out the back to check. He could see the telltale signs. A patch of trampled carpet, overturned trash, a shutter left half open. The trespasser hadn't bothered to latch it properly on his way out. A burglar wouldn't have been so careless. This was more likely to be a nosy neighbor or a crazy fan. Nobody likes to have their privacy invaded. It's something you never get used to, having your life disturbed, your personal objects perused. But journalists tend to be cynical about most things, and a hack like Julius had done a little invading himself in his time. The prowlers would not be interested. They were sick of hearing from him. Still, the intrusion came as a surprise. He thought all that was over. He locked the shutters, sniffed the air, and took one last look around. Nothing. Paranoia followed him back to the kitchen, where he chewed on a dry kipper. He tried to consider aesthetics when purchasing the house, choosing a structure and decor that was neat. He could keep it clean. His sometimes girlfriend Camilla bought the odd ornament or piece of furniture to fill empty corners. The atrium never lost its grandeur, with a small pool in the center for visitors to slake their thirst. But the house was so damn drafty. No matter how high Julius turned the heating, or how many blankets he placed on his head, he was always freezing. Resolution 3, invest in a duvet. The chime of a clock, ormolu, chosen by Camilla to help clutter the hallway, reminded Julius that he had other resolutions to keep. Throwing a snazzy sports jacket on over his fur coat and snagging his favorite trilby hat, he bolted out of the house and jumped onto a passing tram. It was full to the brim with upright citizens, another reason why he didn't like getting to work on time. A mass of whiskers, tails, and anoraks. He stood for the journey, his left paw clutching a strap. His fellow passengers looked half asleep, their inner eyelids closed, stifling yawns and sneezes. As far as modes of transport went, trams seemed like the unhealthiest. All those germs in such an enclosed space. Julius touched his nose. It was dry and warm. He missed Camilla. "Hey, pal!" A ginger face pushed its way into his field of vision. "Are you, It was a Manx, not the most quick-witted of breeds. "You know, ain't you the dude?" "No, I'm not." The tram had arrived outside Bast Tower, and Julius pushed through a dense cloud of yuppies to get off. Against his better judgment, he turned his head to see the Manx leaning out of the carriage. "No need to be so rude. Us cats have got to stick together." "Yeah, right. Us cats have to stick together." As the tram pulled away, Julius watched a stream of pinstripe-suited bipedal tortoise shells and Siamese cats shuffle into Bast Tower. They were glum, single-minded, staring straight ahead. A few mumbled good morning to each other at the entranceway, but no one was cheerful. No cat worth its salt looked forward to a work shift. Julius didn't feel like being one of the crowd that day. Instead, he walked around the side of the grey building, scuffing his hind paws idly along the sidewalk, anything to avoid starting the daily grind. On the right side of the tower was a neon sign that said, "The Scratching Post." That was his place of work. The millstone around his neck. The sign hung above his office window, wide and smog grey. The window was currently occupied by a gaggle of reporters and photographers, faces bristling with excitement, gesticulating in a flashbulb frenzy. At first, Julius thought that he was the centre of the commotion until he turned to see the Persian cat on the bridge. It was his best friend, Mick. Eno Bridge stretched across a river that ran past Bast Tower, spanning a 50-foot drop. It was a simple collection of red brick and steel girders, built to last. The subject of all the excitement was poised on a metal support, ready to jump.
The first chapter has been read, but the story has only just begun. Join us again for more voices, more worlds, more Chapter 1.